Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining Being Patient's live talk. And this is Nicholas, reporter with Being Patient. And today we'll be having Jim Russell on to speak with us about his daughter, Lynne Russell's diagnosis of Alzheimer's at the age of 51. So, Jim, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I hope what we talk about is helpful to people, and I'm very, very honored to be on your program.
Yeah, and I hope people will find lessons from your story as well. And let's start with Lynn's background. Tell us a little bit about Lynn. As a mother, and Lynn as a former educator. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, when Lynn left college, graduated from there, she started with Microsoft as a recruiter in the very early days when they were hiring a lot of high-tech people to start Microsoft's explosion. And so she hired a number of people. She became very friendly. She got to know, of course, Gates and Ballmer, because it was a small firm at that stage. And she made lifetime friends that they worked together, explored together. And I say that only because they will come back in later to help her out in her care. They're huge supporters of that. But she left there to raise a family, and she had her boys. And then she was a consultant doing different work with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, with Amazon and some other people in the high-tech area. And then finally decided in 2009 that she wanted to be a special education teacher. So she went back to school, took out federal government loans to pay for every bit of it. And then went to work in rent and low-income public school system for special education for children from the age of kindergarten to 8th grade. And she loved it. And she finally moved from Renton back to Seattle because she was taking care of her 3 boys. There were 2 teenagers at the time she was diagnosed who were 19, and there was one who was 14. So that she was working at that time for the Seattle public school system, renting a house, and very disturbed by all of the memory problems she was having. So,
Right, and you mentioned it was in our conversation before, in preparation for this interview, that I was around the summer of 2013 and then 2014 that the family also started to notice that something was wrong. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. In 2013, her younger brother and her younger sister were noticing that she had a lot of memory problems, finding her keys and getting the boys organized to help her out with those keys. And she's always been a very super organized person. And they were disappointed in the way she did that, because she was always on the boys to find them. She wasn't on the boys to take care of her bags and their clothes, and she couldn't find her stuff. And it was just unusual for them. And they were disappointed in the way she was taking care of the boys and in the way she was behaving. And she simply brushed it off as having ADHD. She's self-diagnosed as that. But over the years, then we just kept noticing more and more problems. She would forget which food she brought to celebrations of some birthday, and they had to tell her which food she brought to take home. So then they got lost trying to get together on a campground. Then she began to tell our youngest daughter that she was having problems with the work that she had. The interfaces were too bad, that she was going to get fired. And my youngest daughter said, there is no way that was Lynn. I mean, she was always technologically on top. She taught her boys to use technology. They've told me that everything they knew came from her. And she was confident in what she did. And yet she thought she was going to get fired. And she was wrong about that. They thought she was a good job. But she had increasing difficulties at home with the boys. She kept saying she couldn't do the homework on the online pages for the Seattle public school system. The boys started noticing she couldn't cook. She was forgetful. But they supported her. They backed her. all of that time because she was their mom and they loved her and they just kind of took care of her. So we didn't hear about a lot of those things that we might have if they had reached us sooner. We had to take away her car. That wasn't hard. But she finally got to the point where she was willing to take a test. And the test she got showed she had mild cognitive impairment in August of 16. The doctor asked her if she wanted to continue trying to work, and she said, yes, I want to try. She had a very good friend in special education who supported her. But by February of 2017, when they took a second series of psychological tests, she had advanced early onset Alzheimer's. And she resigned immediately and began to let us take care of it. Next day, she signed over all power of attorneys for medical and personal legal with me and my wife, Karen. So that was the start of our care for her, with a commitment and an understanding that she had a diagnosis. Up to that time, Nicholas, she refused to admit it. She didn't want to lose her home, her family, her kids, her respect, her job, her money, her income. You know, everything would be gone with that diagnosis. She fought it.
And, you know, at the time when she was experiencing those early symptoms that you just described, I mean, she was in her 40s, right? You know, because her diagnosis was, you know, in 2017, her Alzheimer's diagnosis was in 2017, and she was 51, right? I mean, she's really young, and I mean, yeah, it's and I mean, for you as a father, like, how did you feel or react to the diagnosis that, you know, she had Alzheimer's?
We had been debating it for a long time. My son and his wife were convinced she had Alzheimer's. They wanted to have her tested. My other daughter, younger daughter, also thought she had Alzheimer's. But my mother had Alzheimer's, and we had sent her brain cells to the Oregon Health Sciences University, and they measured and found it was only Alzheimer's. It was not any link to any of the genomes, you know, that can be a predictor of Alzheimer's. There was nothing in our family. There was no evidence. So that said to us, we don't need to have her tested, because I kept thinking they wanted biological tests. And so I really didn't pay attention to my kids' requests for tests, because Lynn was denying that she had the problem, and she had ADHD. She was under stress. It was menopausal. She had the kids. She was switching jobs. You know, she just had all sorts of explanations for that. And we couldn't believe that she was afflicted with Alzheimer's at the age of 48, 7. It just, even though I had a mother who had it, I didn't think of it. And of course, there's a 20-minute test you can take drawing pictures on it that can give you an indication. And we never insisted on her taking that. We're not sure she would have, but we didn't insist. She's powerful, and she fought us off.
And after, you know, Lynn's diagnosis, you know, her boys, her sons really supported her. Tell us a little bit about that and their, you know, the boys' care for their mother.
Right. It was a very crucial thing, because she was diagnosed in February of 2017. By that time, her two oldest boys were in college, one at Evergreen and one at Western Washington University. So the only one who was living at home was the 15-year-old at that stage. And he was going to school. And so, and every other week, he went to his father's house to live. So Lynn would be on her own. So Karen and I spent a lot of time traveling from Wenatchee over to take care of her, to the point where finally in early 2018, we decided we had to move to Redmond so we could be closer to her and take care of her. But the boys immediately had problems in school. My oldest twin dropped out of school immediately at Evergreen and came back home to live. And I looked at it. I was paying his bills because she was on a 529 program for us. And he his teacher said he was really doing well in school. All he had to do was finish his homework and they would give him a good grade. I said, Henry, do the homework. It's pretty simple. He never got to it. He just couldn't handle it. What he was doing, even though we didn't fully understand it, was caring for his mom. He was calling her friends and saying she's lonely. She wants to talk to you. She needed assistance walking. He was constantly making appointments for Lynn. And then Lynn would get mad at him because she didn't ask him to make that appointment. But Mom, this is one of your best friends. I don't care. You're not supposed to make. So that those fights were going on between the two of them. And my other son, the other twin, just began to get worse and worse grades for that winter and spring term. And he came home in the summertime and thought he could go back to school. And my youngest grandson began to skip school. And he later admitted to us that he skipped school because he felt Mom really needed him to be there. And he felt and believed his mom knew he wasn't really sick, but she needed him to be there. And both of them have confirmed that story is true. They just could not let him. But they covered up everything, cooking, leaving the stove burner on, ending up on the floor from the night before with an empty bottle of wine beside her in the kitchen, and having an intervention with her 14, 15-year-olds, having an intervention with her mother saying, stop. And she did. So took her car keys away from driving, spent a lot of time looking at it, but her whole house repair was falling apart. The boys didn't step in and take care of that. And her ex-husband wasn't going to come over and fix her house on. He had a girlfriend. He had his own life to live. They'd been divorced now by that time for 8, 9 years. And he could start going over there and fixing up that house. That was the boys' responsibility to work with them. But the boys, and he talked to the boys, says, tell your grandpa. They never told us because they were protecting her. So, and then finally, the other grandson completely failed his fall term at Western. And I mean, did not go to a single class and did not turn in one piece of homework. He stayed in his room by himself, promising his friends he'd go, not answering the door when they locked it. My son lives in Bellingham, had him over for dinner every Sunday night, and they never picked up on it either. He was extremely effective at hiding it. So he ended up at home, completely expelled from Western. That's when we knew we needed help with family counsel, because this was, here we were at the age, we had moved in by that time to Renton, but I was responsible for suddenly grandkids, and I didn't have the authority to override Lynn on that. I didn't want to lose Lynn. And if I did something to lose Lynn, I'd liable to lose the boys. And their father was willing to help and support, but basically it wasn't his responsibility. So we finally had a family council scheduled, but we had to postpone it because we found out that there were bed bugs in the boys' home and in the father's home. So we spent, 2 months cleaning that up and getting ready for a family council. But when we finally did get a family council through the Washington Alzheimer's Association, Erica Farrell, she sat the boys down, me, my son, my daughter was on the phone for a Zoom, part of the contacts. The ex-husband was there. She was there. My wife was there. And everybody said, this is what we need to do. This is how we can go. And Lynn said, I feel like I'm losing control. And that was exactly what was happening. She couldn't control it anymore. And after she got over that shock, she began to accept that she had to go into assisted living. And then we found out really what was happening and were able to move her in pretty quickly.
And it was in 2018 that Lynn moved into assisted living, right?
October of 2018. And she had fought it for some time because she went to support groups that the doctors had recommended to her. But she came home after one meeting twice and said, they're 20 years older than I am, and they're not dealing with the same issues I am. I can't relate to any of them. I'm not going back. So she walked into that place knowing she was going to be 20 years younger than the youngest person. And she just said, this is going to be my mission to help them care for those people. So the staff at Aegis, which is where she is, treated her as a caregiver and treated her as a friend. You know, all the supervisors over there were her age. And they're looking at her thinking, oh my God, but for the grace of God, go I. And so they worked with her and gave her chances. They loved her. She became the most active resident there. She participated in programs. She was on the residence council immediately. And it was a marvelous change for her, and she accepted it very well.
And at the time, were you and your wife also still like close by to Lynn at the
Yes.
Aegis?
At that time in 2008, early in 2018, we had bought a house in Renton, which was an over 55 retirement community for us, which we loved to be in. And it was just a 25 or 30-minute run down to see Lynn, which was working out fine. Lynn came up and stayed at our place. We went down there, friends came in and visited. So we were pretty active, and she was pretty safe, and she had a lot of guests coming in. Those friends from Microsoft started to visit her too. And so that helped out. Then in December of 2018, the Microsoft group kind of got together because they had participated in 2 Alzheimer's walks, 2017 and 2018. And they kind of said, well, we can do more. So they threw a birthday party for her, where about 12 or 13 or 14 of her friends came from, frankly, around the United States to come to see her at the birthday party and to see each other, because they hadn't really come together at that point. And they had a ball, and they just decided that they were really going to support Lynn. And so they really supported through the cooperation of her friend, Nancy, and did a lot of things to visit with her and talk with her. So we began to get a lot of help for that. But it was in January of 2019 then when my wife was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer stage 4. So that really forced me into caring more for her than I could really care for Lynn. So fortunately, she was doing well at Aegis Living. The boys were coming over to see her. They had gotten jobs at Dick's Burgers. I don't know if you know where that, but they paid for the college tuition. So they were working well together and enjoying that and being with their mom. So they really recovered emotionally from what they had been through. And so they helped, and Lynn came up and helped with us and stayed with us during Karen's cancer and treatment and everything else. So she finally gave up the treatments and went into hospice at our home, which was extremely difficult. And we had to make some kind of changes because it was too hard to coordinate. Costs were going crazy. And I noticed that I could put Karen in a hospice program at Aegis. So I talked to them and they said, yes, we'll take her for a hospice patient. And so I asked Karen, I said, would you like to go to Aegis and be with Lynn in your final hospice? Well, of course, that's what she wanted. She was just thrilled. So then we talked to hospice and said, we want to move her. Well, hospice doesn't like to move patients from one hospice facility to another, because hospice gives you all of your beds, your medications, your doctors, your nurses, but when you move to another location, all of that stops and you have to start over with a whole new core. They were very worried about a change like that affecting Karen and losing control over her and losing her in the process. And everybody in my family disagreed with it. So I went back in and told Karen, I said, Karen, there's a lot of resistance to this move in hospice. Do you want to stay with it? She said, yes. So I knew she's going to be fine. And so we moved her. She was there for about 3 months. And so at that stage, I rented out my house and moved in there too, to be close to her. And then we lost her in September of 2019. And so then I just got an apartment right next to where Lynn lived, and I've been there ever since. So I can get over there in 5 minutes and see her twice a day.
So there was a point in time when, both your wife and your daughter was in Aegis at the same time, receiving
And me,
care.
and me. I mean,
Yeah.
I moved in
And
too. And frankly, since we had enough space, my sister came in, my son came in. We were sleeping on the floor and sleeping bags and, taking turns being by Karen's side in the last few days. So I had an amazing amount of family support to do that.
after your wife passed away, you started your blog, right? Tell
I
us a
did.
little bit
I
about
promised
that.
Lynn I was going to write that memoir, and when I moved out, I established the blog, and 3 months later, COVID hit. So that's when she suddenly went into isolation. And so from that point on, we've been dealing with COVID, which changed everything.
Hmm.
But the blog has been supported by the Microsoft Posse fans. It has brought in friends from high school, from college, from her teaching program, from graduate school where she got her degree. So the network has spread, and people who's interested in caring for her have spread. So they've sent me stories. I've interviewed them. I could share those with Lynn, share them on the blog. And it's just been expanding. And I think it's an enormous help for me in terms of telling people what's happening and keeping them posted as she goes along. And we had our challenges. I mean, when COVID hit and she was by herself, you know what the isolation problems were with that. I mean, you get lonely, you get anxious, and when that happens, your ability to reason drops down, your optimism drops down, your social skills drop down, and your agitation grows. It was awful, and I thought she was declining faster in Alzheimer's disease, so I thought this was normal. And then as I looked into it a little bit more, it was, my gosh, she's being damaged by the isolation. She was in her room all the time by herself, even though staff came in and touched her, literally with their eyes in there 10 times a day. But when I looked back at that, I counted when they came in to give her food, they came in to give her boosters, they came in to wash her, they came in to brush her teeth, put her to bed. Those 10 times amounted to about 2 hours a day. That mentioned she was in her room for all of 16 hours, only 2 of which were with people coming in and caring for her briefly. And all the rest of the time she was alone. She couldn't figure out how to work the TV. So then that's when we had to start really trying some new ways to deal with her. Got her a cell phone.
And that Jim, for you, COVID-19 and must have been a really hard time for you as well, right? When COVID first started in 2020, that was just, your wife recently passed away, and Lynn is isolated in Aegis. And for you, how was it for you yourself? That must have been hard for you.
Nicholas, one of the most important things was I had a purpose in life. And my purpose was Lynn. And so I could channel all that isolation and loneliness from me and inability to travel and everything else to carry for Lynn. So I bought her a Starbucks iced coffee every single morning and took it over to her and gave it to her. They could take it up to her room. And that's what she used to do in her own life. And so I was able to do that for her. Then we got the boys involved, and we put in a portal in her room. We put in an echo. We posted sheets of music that she liked, so anybody could come into the room and say, echo, or Alexa, please say this, play this for her, the Bee Gees. And so they could play that. We had video chats with them. I started setting up Friday night at 5 o'clock video chats, send it out to people and say, she's going to be available for 15 minutes from 5 to 5:15. If you want to join with that video, you can. Just 2 or 3 people. So then 2 or 3 from the Microsoft Posse would join in and talk to her. And then Pam and her Aunt Jane would talk to her at that time. Her cousin and her friends could all talk to her. So we did that kind of thing. I talked to her daily. She would call me on her phone. Her cell phone worked, so she called me, pretty much any time early in the morning to late at night when she was lonely, which is what I wanted her to do. So we could talk, and I was able to learn how to just kind of calm her down. But that took the toll on me because it was, chewing up my sleep time and interrupting what I was trying to do in terms of writing it, things like that. But the process of writing it, explaining on my blog what we were doing to try to take care of her, going over to visit, leave things for her, even though I couldn't see her. It gave me a lifeline to not focus on how tough it was.
And, on your point about the blog and the fact that, people, in terms of the blog has helped you, share your family story and connect with, people. I know that, one of the big points that you wanted to get across here is, the importance of friends and families that have, offered you, your family, you and Lynn, the support that you needed. Tell us a little bit, about, how important that has been, the support from family and friends for you. And
That's a great question, Nicholas, because it's from starting out as her caregiver, I kind of evolved to the fact that I was more of a team leader with the caregivers who were taking care of her, that they could do things I couldn't do. I mean, think about yourself. If your dad was taking care of you all the time versus having somebody came in from when you were going to college together and you spent 3 or 4 years together going to college, living in a fraternity or whatever it might have been. His point is that those memories were deep and ingrained. And the minute you saw them, the minute you were excited and had a whole lot of things to share with them. If I had my dad coming back to me, talk to me every day, Dad, this would get pretty tiresome. But so they were able to give what I could never give. And so I realized my job was really to make sure that as many people knew how to care for her as possible. And that included working with all the staff and saying, this is what's working, this is what's not, learning from them what works and what doesn't, how they organize, what kind of materials they have, and what kind of activities she has, where she could go, what she could do, getting her out, driving her around, taking care of her, feeding her, all of those kinds of things. And then I could share that on the web so that people would be more willing to come see. And then they started sharing back with me what happened. And I said, can I post that on the blog? And they said, yeah, post it on the blog. So now Nancy posts on the blog and all the Microsoft friends see what she did. And so then that starts to build support for that. So I became to believe that it was not my job really so much as to care for her as to be a team leader to make sure she got the care that she needed. And that meant communicating with all of them about what was happening, how they could help, and talking about what each other are doing. Well, they're coming on Sundays, so maybe you could come on Saturdays. And encourage people to do that, setting up video chats with her with friends, participating in video chats. I got a question from Nancy one time, and she said, what are you doing about her birthday in 2020? I said, I'm not doing anything about her birthday in 2020. She says, well, I'm going to set up a Zoom conference. So she set it up for a 2-day period. We had a Zoom conference for an hour in a conference room, so that Lynn got a chance to talk to maybe over 30 people, including her aunt, her sister, her brother, and everything else. I couldn't have organized that, and but she did, and so I helped her get the linkages with Aegis and all that kind of thing. So that just makes the caregiving that I have even more joyful, because I'm not doing it all, and I can. And frankly, I'm jealous of the way they can have fun with her outside as opposed to me. Recently, in one of the things, Lynn was walking and began to get activated and energized and everything else. She was noticing the guys who were walking around, and Nancy said, "Well, Lynn, you're starting to get randy. You must be interested in those guys." She says, "Oh yeah." That's the kind of deep friendship that they had. They could never have. I watched it time and again. I come to see her. She said hi. She's happy to see me. Somebody she hasn't seen from college for years, she comes to see her, and they just get explosive in excitement, wrap each other's arms, and suddenly they're talking as if they hadn't been apart at all. And so I can't stress enough on the ability to create a whole group of people who can give her insights. As I've communicated on this, what's happened is some people have come up with some very creative ideas. Her sixth grade teacher, who is still in love with her and still remembers her as one of her favorite students, sent me a story about her at Christmas. I mean, in a spelling bee. So I took that story and I read it to her with the boys there. So the boys got that experience with Lynn. Lynn remembered the teacher. She remembered the spelling bee, was able to post it on the webpage. This is a great way to participate with somebody. She gets cards and notes and they say, hope you're feeling well. You know what? I started sending out a note saying, don't send her a note. Send her the story that's your favorite memory of her. Just, you remember when you and I, whatever, and do that? Well, one of her friends from Amsterdam, all right, thousands of miles away, wrote 3 stories from the time when they first worked together, way back, before the boys were even born, even at the time that Lynn got pregnant with the twins. And the twins sat there and listened to that story that they never would have heard if they hadn't shared that. So that they can share, and that's a way for them to share from a long ways away. And people are concerned, they want to do something. Well, there's something very, very important they can do. Just send a note that says, Lindy, we had a great time doing this. Remember that? Just make it short, or tell the story so that the boys can have it in their record and hear it. So
for you, like, support from, friends or family can come in the form of something as simple as, a note or a letter of a shared memory, right?
Yes.
Right. And that adds color not only to Lynn's life, but also to it also adds color to the lives of her sons as well, right? Because they get to learn more about their mother.
Well, and the people who read it in the blog get to learn more about Lynn. When you're a group who taught with her in Renton, you don't know much of her story with Microsoft and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So that cross-pollination of who she was is just marvelous.
And tell us a little bit about Lynn now. Then, you mentioned that she's now in hospice.
Yes, she's had steady decline, of course, and she went from the Alzheimer's 6th stage to the Alzheimer's 7th stage back in August of 2021, which meant that she was fecal incontinent, completely incontinent, and but still able to talk and walk and eat and everything else. But on January 22nd, I asked for information about what her status might be. And the hospice team was called in and they did an assessment as to whether she belonged on hospice already, which surprised me and stunned me and worried me. And she had lost more than 10% of her weight, which qualified her for hospice. She had seizures, 2 seizures that were diagnosed as epileptic. That qualified her for hospice. She had wild mood swings. That qualified her for hospice. So there's a triple whammy there that qualified her for hospice that I, as a caregiver, had missed. I knew each of those things separately, but I didn't realize the implications of that. So she went on hospice, and in December, she weighed 135. In January, when she went on, she weighed 130. And now she's down to 120 or below. And she's gotten less and less able to walk constantly. I spoon feed her twice a day. And I walk with her if it's not spoon feeding. And she walks, she knows me. She knows me less than she used to. So I think she knows me as somebody that can help her. I don't think she's quite sure who I am. It doesn't matter. As far as I'm there, she knows I'm there, and she's glad to see me. She hugs me, and so we've been looking at those kinds of things. And I've recently been doing some reading about that, Nicholas, and I think there are several things that we need to understand about being a caregiver and the experience of caregiving with somebody, especially somebody with Alzheimer's. And a friend of mine, Carol Osler, and I have been working on that. And comes from a man by the name of Sam Wells, who says there's 8 components to making sure that you're living the word of God in terms of dealing with people. But we applied it to caregiving. The first is that you have to physically be there. And there's a tendency to think that's not that important. But I'm there a lot when she's not saying anything, and she knows I'm there, and she will look over at me and smile and be a little comfortable just in her head motions, and then look off into the other world where she's looking. So I'm physically present with her, touching right next to her. The second thing to do is to be very, very attentive to what she's doing. I watch her as much as I watched her when she was 2 and 3 years old in the bathtub when I was washing her, or on a changing table, or she's just fascinating to watch. She's full of mystery. And that's the third thing you have to have respect for, is the mystery of what's going on, the mystery of Alzheimer's, the mystery of my relationship with her. And it's then that I can discover things that I need to do for her. I discovered I needed to give her a straw. People weren't giving her a straw because she chewed on it. I said, well, yeah, she chews on it, but she sucks it down faster. And if she chews on it, I take it out of her mouth and I push it up and I turn it around and give it to her. And then it's those things that you just constantly notice when her shoes aren't tied right, or whatever it might be. You could really be there with that attentiveness. So those 3 things are there. And if you do those 3 things, you've done as much as you can as a caregiver. You can also request that she participate in something. I've been in the bedroom when she didn't want to sit down and she walked out. She came back in and by that time I turned on the music and I said, let's dance. She laughed and we danced. It lasted about maybe 25 or 30, 40 seconds. And then she just let my hands go and walked out. She participated. She chose to participate. That's what I offered. And that's as much as I can do at this stage. The other thing that friends have done too is get her partnership. What do you want to do? You want to go to the park? Do you want to go to the Cal Anderson Park? Do you want to go to the market? And they start becoming a full partner in that. They get more energized. They get more lively. They say, I want to go on the swings. So then Lynn goes over and goes on the swings and they push her. So that's partnership, and then participation, are the other things. And if you have those and they work well, you can enjoy it, and you can also be delighted in that experience. But those things may happen or may not. But if you're a caregiver, if I'm a caregiver and I give her the first 3, I give her a physical presence and attentiveness and enjoy the mystery, then I've given everything I can do. And when it all clicks, those are gems of joy that I can hold with me, as a friend of mine said. Those are the memories I can put in my head when I walk out saying that one didn't work so well today. And all of those things are glorious for me. I experience a glory in that, in being able to do all of that and work at it. So that's what we've kind of thought is a good way to analyze whether or not you've had a good experience. So people who go, have to know she may not be as receptive as you'd like her to be. But boy, if you're there and trying, it just changes her life, because just being with her, if she likes you, then that's great. I walked in and she didn't want to see me. She pushed me away with her hands. She said, no, I'm not. And then she's mumbling about something that we don't. I have to back off, kind of watch. And then I maybe can guide her to a caregiver who can put her down for bed. But that's what I can give her. And then that's what I can share about giving to her. That helps me. That helps me get through the times when it doesn't work for everyone.
And how about, go ahead, Jim. Yeah.
She keeps losing weight. She used to call me the greatest dad in the world. She even gave me a T-shirt once that says the best dad in the cosmos. When we put her in Aegis Living, she only called me the greatest dad in the world. I think she downgraded me because, I put her in assisted living, but she still called me the greatest dad in the world. And she told my staff I was the greatest dad in the world. Staff told me that she said that. Staff told me I was the greatest dad in the world. So I had all these things. But in the past couple of weeks ago, I was looking at her, how much weight she lost, what we could get her. And I really didn't feel like I was the greatest dad in the world. So out of a flaky thought, I asked her, am I still the greatest dad in the world? And she just absolutely said, yep, pointed up at the ceiling. And it wasn't the sweetness with which she said it, it was how swiftly she said it. That's all I can hang on to, Nicholas.
She had no doubt, just no hesitation. She knew.
That's right, no doubt, no hesitation. If she didn't have any doubt, I didn't have any doubt.
And the title of your blog, Jim, nevertheless, dementia, we persist. How do you live by that?
Well, actually, the persist came from her. What was her favorite things to say? Nevertheless, I persist. Her youngest twin gave her a necklace that said, I persist on it. She wore that when she went into Aegis. So that's where it came from. Nevertheless, dementia, we persist. I'm thinking now I should have named it the greatest dad in the world, but I'm not sure she'll give me approval to do that yet. So, but that is, she persists, we persist. Dementia, Alzheimer's persists. We persist, Alzheimer's, even as you persist.
And, Jim, I just wanted to end this interview with one of the points that we talked about in our previous conversation in preparation for this live interview was, in one of your blog posts, you talked about a song called The Crowded Table by the High Woman. Just wanted to, ask you a little bit about the song and, what is it? What were some of the lyrics of the song that touched you, and how does it speak to you in your experience?
Well, as usual, this was brought to me by one of her very good friends, Edith, who helped us diagnose Lynn, frankly, in an incident. Anyway, she loved Lynn, but she moved to Bend, Oregon to retire and live her life, but she misses being with Lynn. And she was riding her bicycle across the path when this song by Crowded Table by Brandy Carlisle and the Highwomen came on. And when she heard the words, you can hold my hand when you need to let go came on, she had to pull off the road and listen to it and sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. So then she called me as soon as she got back and said, I got this song. I want Lynn to hear it. Because I've bought headphones for her and I've taken her cell phone and put it on a backpack. So she can walk around all day listening to the music that she wants. And so Edith obviously said, let's get that song on there. And so I looked it up and found it. Well, when I looked it up and I read the lyrics, it just really hit me. I have a hard time getting through it. You can hold my hand when you need to let go. She's going to need to let go. I can be your mountain when you're feeling valley low. I can be your street light, showing you the way home. You can hold my hand when you need to let go. And then the chorus goes, yeah, I want a house with a crowded table and a place by the fire for everyone. And let us take on the world while we're young and able and bring us back together when the day is done. And when Edith heard that, she wrote me and said, That's all I want, is a crowded table. And that fit, let us take on the world while you're young and able. That's what they were at Microsoft. And that's what they've done ever since. And bring us back together when the day is done, either in person some way or in spirit. It's a beautiful, beautiful song. The door is always open. Your picture's on my wall. Everyone's a little broken and everyone belongs. Yay, everyone belongs. If we want a garden, we're going to have to sow the seed, plant a little happiness, let the roots run deep. If it's love that we give, and it's love that we reap, if we want a garden, we're going to have to sow the seed. Yes, I want a house with a crowded table and a place by the fire for everyone. Let us take on the world while we're young and able, and bring us back together when the day is done.
And a crowded table is what Lynn has, right?
I feel it. I feel it. And Edith was one of the ones who helped build it early on. It is, she has a crowded table. You didn't tell me I was
That's
going
why
to
you meant.
had the interview. What?
So, no, I was just saying, that's, the crowded table, that goes back to your point about why the families and friends have been so important in, in supporting Lynn, right? Because that's what matters. It's their presence and their support.
Yes.
Anything else you'd like to add?
I just hope that what we've talked about is helpful for them, because I know there are millions of people out there who are going through a similar pain.
Well, thank you so much, Jim, for sharing your daughter's story, for sharing your story, and for sharing your family story. We really appreciate it. And for our audience, if you've missed any of this live talk, don't forget to sign up to. Don't forget to if you miss any of this live interview, we'll have a video uploaded on YouTube, and we'll have a transcript published on our website as well. And if you haven't signed up to our newsletter yet, don't forget to do so. And thank you, Jim, again, and thank you for our audience for joining us. Bye.
Thanks, Nicholas.
Thank you, Jim.